I'm actually really excited because we are, and I'm saying this for the first time publicly right here, at Crowd Favorite, we've been exploring using Webflow as a front end for WordPress.
Okay.
And you're like, wait, that's a SaaS, and they have their own CMS and this and that and the other, and they do this and they do that. Yeah, but it's a really great interface. It's something that design teams and marketing teams love.
Hey, everybody, it's Roger with Kinsta. I am very excited to have a good friend, Karim, on the show today. Hey, Karim, how are you?
I'm good, Roger. How about you?
I'm doing really well. It's great to see you. You know, we've known each other now for a couple of years. I'm really excited to talk about what's happening today in the world of digital publishing and the web and all these exciting things. But before we get too far into that, I think you have a really fascinating story of how you got into all of this. And so I'd like to go back. Let's get in a time machine. Let's travel back. How did you get involved with the web?
So I was a graduate student in architecture, and this is in the early 90s, and I fell in love with AutoCAD and programming. I wanted to move from being just an architect to being an architect that really used computers and AutoCAD to its maximum. One thing led to another, and I got a job offer to go to Autodesk in San Rafael, California, right out of university. I failed miserably very quickly as a programmer. It was a dream. Try to take somebody who is really good at explaining design and talking about how to create things in teams and put them behind a desk talking to nobody and writing code. It was a disaster. They very quickly said, you know what? You're really bad at this, but you're really good at explaining the technology. We'd love for you to hang out and do more of that. So I started talking to their clients about what was coming up in upcoming releases. And that led me to a lot of free time in between these trips. And one thing led to another. A friend of mine who was starting an ISP back in '94 got a phone call asking about making a website. And the next thing I know, I had by mistake helped start one of Los Angeles's first web shops.
Very cool. So, all right. So this is late 90s. The web is still pretty new. I mean, we were using tables at that point. I don't even think CSS existed. What did those early projects look like?
My first project was the retirement of the Nissan Z car before the 350 came out. This is for the 300.
Okay.
Then we did an intranet for Nissan. And then after a few other projects, my breakthrough project was I was a project manager for the movie A Bug's Life.
Okay.
For doing that website. And I had the pleasure of having to present at Pixar. And we were fired a multiple amount of times and rehired. And it's a long story that then eventually got the agency that I started bought by WPP, who was investing in US Web CKS at the time.
Okay. All right.
So that brings us to the late 90s, where we went from making small websites, even for large corporations, to creating massive websites for the world's Fortune companies.
Very, very cool. And all of this, obviously, before WordPress came about. So at this point, you were building bespoke CMSs for each of these solutions. How did that work?
At the very beginning, but very quickly, there was a product that came out called Vignette.
Okay.
That was one of the first commercial content management systems that was really enterprise grade. It was just like today's Adobe Experience Manager or Sitecore or one of those. And all these systems have one thing in common. They have a bell curve of life.
Okay.
And they get to a point where the entire enterprise moves on to the next thing. So I spent my ride in dealing with enterprise CMSs until about 2007 is when I found WordPress, really, while it was still being seen as a blog mostly. And I was asked a couple years later by Disney what my opinion was between DrupalJoomla and WordPress. And that made me do the deep research to really fall in love with open source. And since 2010, just been working in really specializing on open source for the enterprise.
Yes, you have. You are definitely one of the voices out there that I see championing open source software. And It's curious. I talk with a lot of people, a lot of agencies, and when I mention WordPress, I get a look, right? And sometimes an actual audible scoff, right? I have learned to bite my tongue. What do you think the enterprise gets wrong about WordPress?
So years ago, it was about security.
Yes.
We've solved that. Anybody who's still making the security argument for WordPress doesn't read. I'm sorry. And we've passed that problem. The reality about enterprise and WordPress is that enterprise is used to having a complete relationship. They want to be handled from top to bottom and have a clear path to resolution. I love the WordPress community, but one thing we don't do is clearly communicate. But this isn't a first-time problem. As a lot of people who've come to my talks know, this was a problem in the late 90s when IBM was fighting with Microsoft and its hardware vendors about getting into the enterprise. And IBM was only able to solve it by doing a partnership with Red Hat to create really bespoke support for the enterprise. And they solved it. So now open source has taken over most of the servers in most of the enterprise. Microsoft has a much smaller market share than it ever did before, and other systems. Same thing can and does happen in the enterprise for open source, whether it's WordPress or Laravel or Drupal, it can happen. It just needs to be approached differently.
Okay.
So when people scoff at the word WordPress, it's because they have imprinted in their mind the biggest problem that WordPress has as a brand. They've categorized WordPress in one of the 5 categories that WordPress has. It still can be a great blog. It still can be a great personal website. It still can be a great small business website. But on the other end of the spectrum, it also can help run all of the public-facing websites for the Walt Disney Company. A majority of them. They're too big to only have one, but a majority of them are WordPress.
Sure, absolutely. And kind of going back here a little bit, what you're talking about with like traditional enterprise solutions. So let's talk about like Adobe Experience Manager. The way I like to talk about it is there's one neck, right? Like when there's a problem, you know who to talk to. And with WordPress, there is definitely this issue, right? Like first of all, there's the software. Well, we can just go download the software. Why do we need to hire somebody to help us with that? And the answer there is, hey, it's a little more complicated than that. And you also want to benefit from somebody's experience and expertise in how to actually configure this for your business. But then, of course, there's also the hosting, right? You have to host WordPress somewhere, whether you're doing it on-prem or you're choosing a company like Kinsta to host it. And now you've got this problem where now there's 2 necks, right? You have an agency and you have a host. And I think my job is in partnership management is to really figure out how to partner with my agencies so that when the client comes to us, we're in lockstep. How do you look at that relationship and how do you help your customers, see that crowd favorite, in this case in Kinsta, are partners in the truest sense and are able to help?
Well, Kingsta's done a great job of being a platform, not trying to be we are WordPress or we are Laravel or we're a platform, PaaS instead of an SaaS. And that's what the enterprise wants. The enterprise wants to understand not just one neck, but a clear path. So what Crowd Favorite does is that provides that clear path. We say, we're not only going to bring in hosting, we're not only going to bring in your other legacy systems that might have nothing to do with WordPress or even open source, but we're going to show you how to clearly connect all of this. And we're going to create an architecture where you have one path to get any support you need, even if that ends up being the agency or the platform or whatever you have, right? It just needs to be clean for them. And it needs to be a total solution. You can't just show up and go, well, there's lots of plugins for that. No, you have to show up and go, we're going to use this plugin because it's a great commercial plugin. We're going to use this open source plugin because it's a great open source plugin. But for these other things, we're actually going to connect up to this SaaS or cloud service. And you have to have a complete architecture. And that's a difference between sort of the enterprise and the mid-market where you can say, an agency or a platform can say, I'm going to create an ecosystem and everybody's going to adapt to my ecosystem. We have very few projects that are anything like the project before.
Okay.
In fact, even in the WordPress world, a lot of folks who are seen as competitors or crowd favorite specialize in media or in publishing or in some vertical. We've taken on more of a traditional system integrator approach.
Okay.
We help companies integrate open source to suit and adapt to what they need, not to adapt their departments to whatever software is in vogue at the moment.
And I think that's the big advantage with open source, right? Is you've got the ability to dig into all of the code, understand it completely, adapt it as you need. And to me, that's why the no-brainer for why more companies should be using open source software. Switching gears for a second. You started your career off in the 90s. The dot-com boom, happened. I graduated right as that was happening. Really excellent timing as all the jobs disappeared. Today, 2025, we're going through another bubble. And I mean, from everything I'm looking at, this bubble's even larger. The orders of magnitude are pretty preposterous right now. Based on your experience from the dot-com boom and what you learned and what you experienced in happening then, and fast forwarding to today, what is similar, what's different, and how can companies and individuals be prepared for this?
Now, I've got a question for you before I answer that. When you said we're experiencing a bubble, do you mean we're in the growth part of the bubble, or do you mean we're in the part where the bubble is starting to collapse?
Wow. Again, I do index fund investing because I have learned that I am terrible at predicting things.
Okay.
Based on my experience of the dot-com boom, feels like we are over the top of the thing and we're headed towards something. I don't want
We're
to use
taking that deep breath in before we look down the other side of the roller coaster.
I mean, we're looking at like OpenAI is putting out Sora 2, which is just a slot machine, and just other things that are happening. It feels like we're in the end stages here.
So I happen to agree with you.
Okay.
I've seen now quite literally 4 sort of bell curves of growth.
Okay.
And they're not complete bell curves. They don't go down to 0, but they do this and they come down here, and then they do this and they come down. And I think we're about to head to a moment where, from everything I'm seeing from the enterprise, and if you're thinking that the enterprise is the canary in the coal mine, I happen to agree. It's what I've seen in the last 30 years. We're hitting a moment where the enterprise is saying the last 12 years of VC, PE investment cycles in the word SaaS, in the concept of social media, blah, 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 isn't working. And the latest generations are becoming immune to even social media, which is why you're seeing, for instance, as proof outside of what we're talking about, Universal, Warner Brothers, and a bunch of other companies are investing in these 1-minute dramas, these vertical dramas, they're calling them.
Okay.
Where instead of doing TV shows, they're doing series that are the episodes are 1 minute long and made to consume on your phone.
Okay.
And they're creating platforms around that. So they're trying to mix social media and episodic television and bringing it down to that. So everything's changing, right? And they're trying to bring all this stuff together. Getting back to our neck of the woods, what does that mean? For me, it means that procurement in the enterprise is saying, we're tired of churn. Right now, every single time a new SaaS product takes a new investment cycle, they raise their prices with the excuse of 10 more features. But the reality is I need one of those 10. The rest of them is an excuse to raise their pricing. And each one of these SaaSes is only growing horizontally by trying to eat up other people's SaaSes. So you can't get best of breed. Everybody's now trying to sell everything. That's what procurement's saying to me. And so the cost is going up past the level of value. The value chain is disappearing. To me, that sounds familiar. How many streaming services do you have at home, Roger?
So right now we've got it down to I pay for YouTube because I can't deal with ads. I've got HBO Max that comes with my AT&T cell phone. I have Apple TV Plus, of course, Netflix, and then we get Amazon Prime, but that's so ad ridden. But yeah, so I've
So you're
left it down to just 5,
Yeah, but you're only paying for 2 or 3 of them. You're paying for
3
you're
of them.
paying for no ads on YouTube, and you're paying
YouTube,
for Netflix.
yep, and
The
then
other ones
Apple
are
TV
really
Plus.
part of other things, right?
Correct, a bundle,
2.
yes,
Do you know how many streaming services there are right now that are trying to figure out how to survive?
a lot.
Exactly. Right. And
Yeah,
it's a mess. Same thing is happening for the enterprise, but they're even ahead of the curve. They're going, I just will cut off everything else. So if you're in the industry, my wife happens to be in the entertainment industry, she has every single streaming service, every single one. But it's the industry, the few out of all of them that she has to pay for. It's a tax deduction, who cares? But the average consumer can't afford to have all the streaming services. It's ridiculous.
agreed,
So,
agreed.
and this idea of renting the movies online and then having a show now and all sorts, it's crazy. It's destroyed. So getting back to our neck of the woods again, something's got to change. There is going to be a next cycle. And here's the good news for anybody who's involved with open source, whether it's Laravel, WordPress, Drupal, any of those things. The opportunity is the enterprise wants to own its data. It's tired of churn. All of these systems, I'm going to stay out of content management systems. I'm going to use CRMs as an example. Whether you're with HubSpot or Salesforce, you have access to the data, but those APIs are becoming more and more restrictive. You want to go from one to the other. It's a 7-figure churn to migrate. The cost of migrating from one to the other can be as much as 7 figures. In the CMS world, it's easily 6 figures, even if you're a mid-market company. So they're like, no, let me just own my data. How do I own my data? Well, it's a lot cheaper to migrate from open source content management system A to open source content management system B than it is to try and get your information out of Sitecore, AEM, or any of the other ones. Just think about that. Secondly, this idea of having to go horizontal. The enterprise wants to manage content. The enterprise wants to manage information. Presentation layer could be completely different. I'm actually really excited because we are, and I'm saying this for the first time publicly right here, at Crowd Favorite, we've been exploring using Webflow as a front end for WordPress.
Okay,
And you're like, wait, that's a SaaS, and they have their own CMS and this and that and the other, and they do this and they do that. Yeah, but it's a really great interface. It's something that design teams and marketing teams love.
mm-hmm.
But at the same time, Webflow is also growing horizontally. I was like, I just want to look at this. And they have a great visionary executive team over there that was like, take a look. So we're actually looking at how could we bring the power of that interface to create front ends to the power of WordPress and the WordPress ecosystem. I'm also talking to traditional DXPs about some of the features they have in their DXPs. Bring it to open source. Let the data sit in open source, and you can still have your black box of special stuff that happens, but make sure that the pre and post data is sitting in somewhere where they own. Why do you need to own it? Why do you need to host it? It's only a cost to you. Let that sit on Kinsta, where the client directly owns a relationship with Kinsta, right? That is coming. That is already here in the world of procurement, in the world of IT decision making.
And it just makes sense, right? Owning the data, like it blows my mind how much companies are giving their data away to somebody else. And we're seeing this with the AI, all the AI stuff, right? Everybody is just uploading everything into these systems. And at some point, you have to think, wow, these guys could be using this to compete against us.
For Crowd Favorite, I think 8 years ago, was tired of having 4 or 5 different ERP systems internally, CRM, ERP. And we said, all right, how do we synchronize the data between them? And it wasn't finding these 6 systems and having each API talk to each other. We actually created a module in the center, being system integrators. We called it Crowd Sync. And we had everything integrate into one master database, which is a source of truth for all of the systems. And it works. And taking prospective clients through how we do it and how we think of it and how we help companies own their own experience, own their own data, and be able to churn when they need to from specialty product A to specialty product B has made their lives easier.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Thinking forward here for a moment before we wrap up,
Sure.
2026 is right around the corner here. It sounds like you're all in on owning data. Of course, you're all in on open source. Is there something in the open source world that you think people should, A, be more aware of? And how do you recommend people get more involved with open source in general?
There's so many really cool projects. Recently I've been doing a lot of work with the Linux Foundation, and that opened up my world of understanding communities outside of WordPress or Drupal or Laravel. There's so much. There's so much to get involved with. I'd say find, if you're a technologist, what tool are you passionate about using? There's an open source version. Find it, join that community. Because whatever you've been thinking about lacked in your tool is there. If you're a marketer, start looking up open source alternatives to some of your favorite SaaSes and tools. If you find something that is a, 8 out of 10 or 7 out of 10, but there's these 3 things missing, it's probably cheaper to have those 3 things added to it, even by a system integrator or by your own internal team, than it is to keep using the SaaS you're using. And then there's great companies like Kinsta that will help you set that up, that will host environments for you.
Yes, we will. Yes, we
Yeah.
will. Fantastic. Karim, we've gone over my time
Sorry.
because this is fascinating. We could talk for hours about all of this. So I hope to have you back on at some point. And catch up on other predictions we've got here. In the meantime, if people are interested in getting in touch with you or in getting in touch with Crowd Favorite, what are the best ways for them to reach out to you?
So if they've got any professional questions at all, please reach out at Crowd Favorite. We'll get back to you right away, and we'd love to jump on a call. So crowdfavorite.com, spelled the American way or the English way. And if they're interested in just regular open source and some of the other things I'm doing, I sometimes blog about that over at marucchi.com.
Excellent. We'll have links to everything in the post. Karim, as always, it's very enlightening to talk with you. It's lovely to see you. I look forward to seeing you again soon in person.
Thank you, Roger.